For Ukrainians, war isn't just a headline. It's everyday life. Bombings, blackouts, cold and death are all too familiar aspects of war. And information can be yet another weapon. Good evening, my name is Maja Mazurkiewicz, and welcome to the Anatomy of Disinformation. Are we sure that what we hear about Ukraine and Ukrainians is true? 4 years in, and fatigue is growing, not only in Ukraine, but also in Western societies. The question is whether this exhaustion is natural or if it's being deliberately amplified. And what does peace, so desperately needed now, really mean? Our first guest is someone who documents war crimes, speaks directly with people who survived them, and makes sure that the world knows about them. Despite the ongoing peace talks, Russia's attacks on Ukraine have intensified this winter, and Ukrainians are suffering some of the harshest conditions since the start of the war. Let's talk about that and more.
Oleksandra Matviichuk, head of the Center for Civil Liberties. She's a human rights lawyer and head of the Center for Civil Liberties, which works to defend freedom and human dignity in Ukraine and the OSCE region. Matviichuk co-created the Tribunal for Putin, an initiative that documents international crimes in all regions of Ukraine under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. In 2022, she received the Nobel Peace Prize for the work of the Center for Civil Liberties and was given the Dutch Auschwitz Award in 2025.
Oleksandra, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today, straight from Kiev.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for finding a time, and I know we're almost 4 years into the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, and yet it's the toughest winter for this period of time. How are you right now?
Not easy time, frankly speaking. Russia destroyed energy infrastructure in Ukraine, and last week it was minus 17 degrees on Celsius. Next week we expected minus 25 Celsius degrees. So people are literally freezing in their home without heat, electricity, light, sometimes internet connection. Just a bright illustration, I use now flashlight to be in this interview because there is no electricity in my house.
And that's everyday reality for all of you living in Ukraine. In Poland, we're also trying to support, and there was a big movement to bring generators into Ukraine and support Ukrainian people living in those circumstances right now to have electricity. And that was also very much recently misused, and demagogue showed that there was kind of Russian influence operations trying to show Poles that this aggregator are being sold on OLX.
It's a very widespread Russian propaganda, but what is matter that Ukrainians will always remember this solidarity and support from people in Poland in this dramatic time of our history. This delegation from Poland have just come recently, and they had meetings with mayor of Kiev and with other people, and all newspapers in Ukraine wrote about this generosity. And we're literally grateful. It's not easy, frankly speaking, to live like this. So people in Ukraine will always remember the support from people from Poland.
And I think that those are very important words, because we only can imagine and hear to the people like you to see what you are going through. But that's the everyday life, as I said, of each of you. And you are also, in your work that you've been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, you are basically going to the people that lived through the worst war possible Russian situations. I mean, like the crimes that they've been doing.
Yes, we are documenting war crimes in this war for 12 years already, and we document different types of atrocities which Russian troops committing, because Russia uses war crimes as the methods of warfare. It's not accidental things. They instrumentalize the pain and deliberately inflicting enormous suffering to Ukrainian civilians in order to break people resistance and occupy the country. And yesterday I was in Kiev Botanic Garden to document another thing, how this deliberate destruction of critical infrastructure had a bad impact to the plants there, because we have tropical plants which need special temperature, and now they're all freezing. So it's also silent victims of Russian atrocities.
And there's a normal life that each of us is having, yet Russia is exactly putting those things into different places and making you suffer as much as you can at the same time when we are having peace talks.
It's very interesting to know that this Trump's year of negotiation has become the deadliest year for civilians. UN estimate that the number of people being killed and injured in 2025 was bigger in 31% than in 2024. And I started to reflect why it's so. And I understood that it's because we completely lose human dimension in this all peace talks. Politicians discuss natural minerals, Russia's territorial claims, geopolitical interests, even Putin's vision of Ukrainian history, but they don't speak about people. And this led to a situation that Russians decided that they can do whatever they want. So now we are in two parallel reality. The peace talks is going, trying to present progress, but we live in completely different reality, in reality of the deadliest year since the 2022.
And at the same time, there are bigger and bigger amount of the Russian influence operations. We've seen it in Poland and in the Western world that are trying to jeopardize as well our relations and bringing quite a lot of issue of fatigue, for example.
Yes, because this war has not just military, but also informational dimension. And in this regard, this war has no limitation in national borders. And this war is going on territory of Poland. The Russians are fighting for hearts and minds of people in Poland because it's much easier to crash the country when you hacked their own citizens. And this is the new reality in era of post-information, when people spend more and more time in social networks, and they start to lose the ability to make distinction between lie and truth.
And have you seen any particular influence operations or narratives going into the war crimes and the topics that you are working with for 12 years, so from the first Russian invasion into Ukraine, right?
Yes, there are different patterns. Russians try to pretend that there is no war crimes at all. Probably you remember that in first months of large-scale war, when Russian troops were kicked out from Kiev region, we found dead bodies of people who lay scattered around the streets until their liberation, like Bucha, Matyzhin, Vorzel, Irpin, and other cities and settlements. We sent mobile groups to work there, and we found dead bodies of civilians in the gardens of their own households. We found dead bodies of civilians in mass graves, men and women with a hand tied under their back. We found dead bodies of civilians, the whole families with children in civilian cars. But Russia, even that time, publicly told that its performances, that its actors, it's not real dead bodies, it's just something disinformation. And that is why it's so important that we document all these crimes. Because if Russia can say this during the events, we can just imagine what Russia will say after decades.
Do you think that Russia will ever be punished for those crimes?
I think that we have a huge chance to break this circle of impunity which Russians enjoyed for decades. because Russian troops committed horrible crimes not just in Ukraine. They committed horrible crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished. So it's an important task, not just for people in Ukraine, because we are doing this to prevent a next Russian attack to the next nation.
And you think that by bringing it to the public, and I understand that you also not only bring it to the public, but also bring it to the governments, you really are changing the way how the Western societies and how the Western governments are responding to what is happening in Ukraine and what Russia is doing?
Yes, I hope that all these dozens of thousands of episodes which we have already documented will be a ground for the right decisions and right actions. And what our strategy for current moment? We must establish justice as a parallel, independent track. What do I mean? We don't know what will be in this peace agreement. And in the first iteration, in 28 points plan, we all remember it was the total amnesty for Russian war crimes. But for International Criminal Court, it doesn't matter what will be in peace deal. Even it will be total amnesty, International Criminal Court will not stop its investigation, will not withdraw arrest warrants. So we have a suite of opportunity to establish several other international accountability mechanisms, like Special Tribunal on Aggression, International Register of Damage, and repatriation credit, because justice has also financial side. And that's why we must be hurry to make it.
And that's a real fight, not only for peace, but also for the truth. And thank you so much for this. And we hope that you're going to manage.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, let's see a report on the latest wave of Russian disinformation in Ukraine.
As a result of yet another Russian attack on energy infrastructure on February 3rd, upward of 1,100 buildings were left without power in Kyiv alone. In the ever-growing darkness and biting cold plunging to as low as -23°C, Russian disinformation thrives. TVP World contacted a Ukrainian citizen based in Kyiv and a former employee of a diplomatic mission to obtain first-hand testimony of Russian disinformation efforts. Fearing retaliation, they agreed to be interviewed on the condition of anonymity.
Russia is spreading disinformation that the Ukrainian government is to blame for everything, that if the Ukrainian government had agreed to Russia's peace, then Ukrainians would not be suffering. They would have heating, electricity, water, and so on. Russian disinformers exploited the context of the so-called Mindichgate corruption scandal.
Spanning between 2024 and 2025, Mindichgate was an investigation by Ukraine's anti-corruption bodies into large-scale bribery in the country's energy sector during the Russian invasion. The investigation revealed that a group, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky's close friend Timur Midnich, had taken control of Ukraine's Energoatom, a state-owned company that operates all 4 of Ukraine's nuclear power plants. The group blackmailed contractors into paying 10 to 15% kickbacks, or have due payments for completing work blocked.
Mindich and some of the culprits are Jewish. This fact provoked anti-Semitic sentiments in Ukraine that Russia capitalized on by promoting the idea that Jews were robbing Ukraine, that the president was Jewish, that Jews want to exterminate us all. So where did Mindich and the others flee to? Israel. And somehow the Ukrainian authorities let them go. Then Ukrainska Pravda journalist Mikhailo Tikhach finds Mindich in Israel and politely talks to him. Mindich tells him that he's living his life in Israel in warmth, no blackouts and so on and so forth. Russian disinformation also targets a certain Ukrainian audience with another narrative, namely that the Ukrainian government is deliberately causing blackouts to exterminate the Ukrainian people. Sounds absurd, but for some, such narratives are plausible. In large and small Ukrainian cities, protests are taking place locally on a small scale. We're talking about 10 to 50 people, perhaps up to 100, blocking roads, attacking utility workers and demanding the electricity to be turned on. That's because people can't take the situation anymore. Russia is trying to recruit them by offering easy money. Almost every day there are reports of people who pass information to or otherwise collaborate with Russia and are being detained. That is exactly what we are seeing now in the context of these rallies. Everything that is happening now reminds me of what I saw in Ukraine in 2020 during the coronavirus pandemic, when Russia bribed certain anti-vaxxers, who then joined rallies against the Ukrainian government and promoted not only anti-war narratives, but also anti-Ukrainian narratives. Now we are seeing something similar.
Peace talks don't happen in a vacuum. They are shaped by narratives. Russian disinformation is preparing the ground, using fatigue and fear to redefine what peace should mean. With our next guest, we'll talk about how these stories are built, amplified, and weaponized, both in Ukraine and across the West.
Dr. Yehor Brailian, historian and journalist. He is an associate professor at the Kiev Aviation Institute, where he specializes in international relations and strategic studies. Dr. Brailian is also an analyst at Detector Media, where he examines Russian disinformation and hybrid warfare. He is involved in international forums on security and media, with a research focus on Ukrainian-British relations and global propaganda dynamics.
Yehor, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. Well, specifically, you are also in the circumstances without the electricity, although you're in other region, in Lubny, in Moldova region, right? So
yes, I'm in Lubny right now, and we don't have the electricity.
Influence operations and the war that you are suffering from is not only the war that is taking your electricity out, but also is trying to manipulate and change the attitudes of people both in Ukraine and in the Western world.
Yes, for sure. Russia is continuing its propaganda all over the world, including Europe, and one of the main targets of these Russian influence operations is Ukrainian diaspora and Ukrainian refugees. And actually, it dates back, these active measures dates back to the Cold War times. And since then, Russia was trying to share the narrative that Ukrainians are neo-Nazis, that Ukrainian nationalists think bad about other nations, about, Jews, Poles, and other nations. And the current narrative of Russia in Europe is following, like Ukrainians are allegedly stealing welfare funds, so the EU countries must stop social help for Ukrainian refugees, and that's how Russia is trying to manipulate public opinion in the European Union.
And you are seeing those narratives being spread in all of the countries, or some certain countries are more targeted with it?
It depends on the country, because, for example, when we can take Poland, Russia is trying to manipulate different hot historic topics, such as Volyn massacre or, Second World War topics in general. So when we can pick up, for example, Britain, Russia is trying to share the narrative like you have your own problems with illegal migrants, why you need to support Ukraine. In Italy, we do have Russian narratives about peace, pace, like it's time to sign a peace deal, but Zelensky doesn't want to do it, and so on and so on. So it depends on the country, because Russians are really good, in monitoring public opinion in different countries.
Do you see that they are very much working with those influence operations before there are, for example, peace talks or certain meetings from the governments?
It's they're working constantly, so it's ongoing process. And actually, Russians have this system. So influence operations are integrated in their defense and intelligence system. So we can't say this narrative was disconnected with some situation on the front line and vice versa. So all is interconnected. Like what Russia is doing in Europe, the same Russia is doing, in the Middle East or in Africa. So all is connected. And our main task is to share our own narratives. Like there is no need, in my opinion, to debunk because all these influence operations are doing and are organized by Russian intelligence. So they are really smart people, and we need to do more and better Russian studies. It's my basic recommendation for our Polish friends as well.
And do you see that it's working already in Ukraine? Because Ukraine is also heavily targeted by the Russian disinformation influence operations, and also on the topic of history, right?
Yes, Russia is saying constantly like Ukrainians and Russians are the same nation, and there was no Ukrainian nation, Lenin created Ukraine, and some other interesting stories with maps and documents. But for Russia, more important topic for manipulations is mobilization. That's why Russia is trying to say to Ukrainians, don't go to the Ukrainian army because you will be killed in action in a very short time. So mobilization is one of the top one of the hottest topics for Russian propaganda in Ukraine.
And did they succeed?
Well, it's very hard to say, it's very hard to measure propaganda, but at some point Russians are successful because some people really believe, and unfortunately we've had some examples and precedents when people will go into military conscription bases and they were blown up, and in this way they became dead, after reading some Telegram channels.
And do you see that Ukraine is also succeeding in spreading their own narrative?
Yes and no, because finally we got it, and finally we understood we need to share our own narrative for different audiences, including inside the Russian Federation. And we still have, this debate about Telegram, what to do with Telegram, because Telegram is the main messenger in the occupied territories, and we want to have this direct connection with people who are still living there, so trying to have this communication with them and to explain to them that Ukraine is with them, and in some time these lands will be liberated from the Russian occupation.
Igor, thank you so much for telling us all of those specific examples, and I wish you a safe night tonight.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Governments react to voters, and voters react to narratives. Some know exactly how to shift them and turn fatigue into policy. So the next time you hear someone complain about Ukrainians living in their country, pause for a moment and ask yourself who gave them the idea to resent refugees. And remember to keep calm and think deeply.